All right, let's get the Illinois side of things. Let's kind of recap this team through 2 weeks. Of course, one solid victory, one gut-wrenching loss that Joey Wagner and I broke down. But Joey, you kind of reset, you watch the film, you see a lot of good things, and then you see a lot of bad things as well. So I figured we take the time right now. Like, let's reset. Let's talk about why there's reasons for optimism about this team, and then also why there's reasons for real concern, because you're 1-1 when you want to be 2-0. So I'll present you the floor right away. Your number one reason for optimism for Illinois football right now.
Chase Brown. I mean, honestly, the guy is it. Jeremy, you have been beating this drum since really you saw him arrive in 19 at Illinois, but you're seeing a little more buzz about Chase Brown over the course of the first 2 weeks, and it's kind of about time. I mean, he's a really good back, and he needs to be in the conversation with those game-changing backs in the Big Ten and in recent. I don't know, maybe that's hyperbole, but in recent Illinois football history, I mean, he has really been. I think I saw Chris Hummer tweeted out like 42 or 40.2% of Illinois' total yards belong to Chase Brown. Yeah, dude, that's not like normal. Like, that's a lot, and I you need a reason for optimism. It's him, and that's not even bringing up Isaiah Williams, who's also had a really good start. I know there's some red zone issues, and I know there's things that you kind of raise your eyebrows at, but man, those two, Chase specifically, can clean up some mistakes on a growing offensive line.
Yeah, let's start with Chase, because right now he's leading the country in yards, and that's through 2 games. A lot of backs don't have 2 games, but it's 350 yards. He's number one in the country. He's number 2 in the country in yards per game. So even if you just do it per game, I know it's a small sample size, he's averaging 175 yards per game. That's ridiculous. No matter what opponent you're playing, we know Indiana's not a great run defense. We know Wyoming's not a great team, but that's still impressive, and that's coming off of a great season last year, in which we've talked about, Joey. Really, most of that yardage and carries came in 8 games. And during the last 9 games, Chase Brown has more than 1,200 rushing yards. So this is not new. And I think one of the most impressive stats, because you kind of mentioned it there, is how much he can overcome O-line mistakes. He can overcome blocking mistakes. Not to say the O-line is never good, or, the tight ends have been particularly good blocking. We'll get to the tackles here in a moment, but 223 of his rushing yards, according to Pro Football Focus, are after contact, right? That's 4 yards per carry that he's getting after contact. That's a ridiculous number. Last year, it was 4.14. He had 700 yards after contact last year of his 1,005 that he got. So it's not only he has the acceleration and burst and he can win one-on-one battles, Joey, it's the ability to break through those arm tackles, those kind of half blocks that the defender gets his arm on him. He doesn't go down easily. And he is proving himself, as you said, to be one of the best backs in recent Illinois history. I think you can put him up there. I don't know if he's past these guys, but he's in the conversation with guys like Mikel Lashore and Rashard Mendenhall. Now, those guys were physically bigger, so they're probably going to be better NFL prospects. But Chase Brown is putting himself as a college running back in that category. And I think he's going to be, if he stays healthy, man, it's going to be the best season since Mikel Lashore put up the single season rushing record. Like those are the kind of numbers he's putting up. So the fact that you have that guy who can produce even when other parts of the offense are struggling or the defenses are focused on him is really impressive. Now, do I expect him to go for 175 against Wisconsin and Iowa? Probably not. Right. But he's got a capability of going for 100 against any team. Like, the expectation is Chase Brown runs for 100 yards. That's an unbelievably great thing to have.
Is it? That's pretty good, man. And like, and remember last season, I know we talked about this on a previous pod, but he faced stacked boxes and he put up 1,000 yards. And I think over the course of this season, you will see less stacked boxes. I know Indiana really sold out to stop Chase Brown on Friday night. Seems weird to say, doesn't it? On Friday night. But I think the passing game's got another step to take, which means so does Chase Brown when he's not seeing everybody in the box. No, I'm with you. I don't think Iowa, Wisconsin, you're going to see those gaudy numbers. But Jeremy, the next 2 games, Virginia run defense that allowed Richmond to kind of get where they needed to go on the ground, and Chattanooga, that might be like center of gaudy numbers universe for this guy.
When we did our all Big Ten draft, didn't Piper take him number 1, Chase Brown? Like that's looking like
Yeah.
a very, very good decision because the floor was so high, right? He's been an all Big Ten third team guy, but like right now, he set the baseline of an all Big Ten first team season, right? Like, can other backs get enough carries to do what he's going to do? I mean, I don't expect him to get 36 off more often, but he's going to get 20, 25 every game. And not a lot of other Big Ten backs are going to do that. And he obviously makes the most of them. You mentioned kind of part of the other positive, and I know it comes with some caveats here that it needs to be better and can be better. But Tommy DeVito and Barry Lunny Jr. have really improved this passing game. Like we'll get to the receiver side of this, Joey, but I know it's a small sample size. I know you played a bad Wyoming team. I know Indiana's defense isn't great, but Illinois is averaging 224 passing yards per game to 237 rushing yards. That's what you need. I know they do it in a dink and dunk way right now. They need to be better down the field. But DeVito, it's partly because of the offense and the short passes, but 67 completion rate is way better than what the 50 they were hovering around last year. 131 passer rating right now compared to last year. They're at 108. They're moving the ball through the air. Now it's shovel passes, it's screen passes, but they're finding a way to make plays without having to give the ball to Chase Brown. They need to do a better job in the red zone, but they are moving the ball down the field through the pass game far better. So defenses at least have to plan for that.
Yeah, I think, like, again, you can look at any quarterback in the country. You can look at Tommy DeVito's in that mix in the Indiana game and say, boy, you know what? He'd like to have that one back. Like that, dude, that's what college quarterbacks do, is they make throws that you would like to have them back. But, and, maybe there's some, I don't even know if there's frustration with the first two. I think the first two games of Tommy DeVito gone about as well as you could possibly hope they would have gone. To your point, I think more vertical stretching the field is something Illinois needs to get to. I don't know if that's a factor of Tommy DeVito. I don't think it is. I think it's a factor of who's going to be on the other side of the catch and who can make those plays downfield. But I mean, dude, he and Barry Lunny have made this at least a formidable. I guess formidable is the right word. Passing game. The Iowa game's not walking through that door in Iowa City where you couldn't get 100 yards. Or I know Charlotte, I think that was probably different because Chase was doing Chase things and you probably just want to give him the ball. Like those days of
under 100 passing yards.
100 yards. Like that. Come on, man.
Remember, we were setting over under for passing yards.
Not a hot take. Those days are probably over. I don't think that's the hottest take I've ever thrown out there.
Last year, when we were doing over-unders for these games, we were setting passing yards at like 74.5, 79.5. Like that's
it was like 124.5. It was like a pretty good day.
And how are they doing it? It's not stuff like that is revolutionary. It's shovel passes, screen passes to Isaiah Williams. Get him in space. It's a quick hitch. Get the ball out quickly to Brian Hightower. And that's another part I'll talk about here, I think is a positive. The wide receivers are better. Like they are better than last year. And I think Isaiah Williams taking a step forward as a wide out, and he's got to get better with the drops. But and all of these guys do. But you're seeing them make more. Like Isaiah makes plays that other people on this team outside of Chase Brown just can't make. So he has become that secondary playmaker to Chase Brown that Illinois so sorely needs. And then Brian Hightower just being able to get a 7-yard catch for you. Like, yes, you can go up and maybe win some down the field. He won one in Indiana, didn't count, but he can start to do that. Pat Bryant, I think, is the best deep threat they have. He needs to be more consistent with it, but he does have enough athleticism, size, physicality to be that guy. But you're seeing him. I mean, he passed up Casey Washington, right? And Casey's a solid receiver. And I kept saying, like, he's a solid guy. I think I'd love to have him as your 3-4 guy. He's now that guy instead of being your number 2. So I think it's positive to see that Pat Bryant, Brian Hightower have emerged, Isaiah Williams has. Now it's about consistency for those guys. I'll get into it with the concerns because remember, we're focusing on the positives here, but the wide receivers and quarterbacks, the passing game is better. It needs to continue to get better.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the shovel passes because every time Barry Lunny calls a shovel pass for Isaiah Williams, an angel gets its wings. I mean, it's the easiest way to get the ball into the guy's hands and let him go do things that other people can't do. it makes me happy to see because it's so simple.
And whenever you have that motion now, because he gets it, he gets a first down on it, they pay attention to him rather than maybe two who could get the ball, or Tommy could keep it or pass it to somebody on an RPO or whatever. It just gives you another threat when you have that. I want to get to another one. I think the offensive tackles, Joey, are pretty good. Alex Palczewski looks like a different player than last year. Devastating run blocker. Julian Pearl, we've only seen him one game, but he was really good. And I think we both think, and Illinois thinks, he's an NFL prospect. And I think Isaiah Adams has come in and been everything they could hope for. He looks like he was one of the top JUCO offensive tackles in the country, but some of these guys like Zy Chrysler's going through a little bit of a learning curve here. Isaiah Adams got dropped in. It's like you just cloned Vidarian Lowe, put him at left guard for a game, then he moved to left tackle and looked basically flawless until that final drive. So they got three guys that I feel comfortable playing tackle and starting at tackle in the Big Ten, which certainly was a concern back in December.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the tackle. I would also just say the left side of the line, when healthy, with Julian Pearl and Isaiah Adams. I think there's a pretty firm belief inside the building that those are two NFL draft picks. And I know, like, it's the second game of Pearl at left tackle and Isaiah Adams in the Big Ten, but like they're really high on them. And remember, Jeremy, when they got Isaiah Adams, they thought he was going to be a tackle.
Yeah.
Alex Palczewski was off to the NFL draft. I think you probably would have kept Julian Pearl at right tackle, brought Isaiah Adams in for left tackle. So that, I mean, it says a little bit about him too, to be able to slide in and play guard at a level that he's playing, and then to slide out and play tackle again after Julian Pearl on a Thursday. And it didn't register with me, Jeremy, until today. Like Brett Bielema said, Julian Pearl went down on a Thursday, and in my mind, I was still in normal week. Like, oh, okay, well, you got Friday to figure it out. Well, you kind of don't. Like, it didn't hit me that it was the day before the game that he went down with. It looked, we saw him in a walking boot. I'd guess an ankle deal. I would. Brett Bielema thinks he'll be back for the Virginia game, but man, that left side of the line when healthy of Pearl and Adams, that's really, really good. And then you got a 759 career starts at right tackle.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, now to your point and the concern, I'm sure this will be for our next segment here. You got to figure out a little more chemistry, a little more communication between center and right guard. But man, those other three positions have really hit the ground running.
Yeah, let's move to the defensive side of the ball. I think we knew Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph would be pretty good. I think Newton's been even better than we expected, especially after that all-timer at Indiana. But I think Keith Randolph, maybe doesn't show up in the stats, but his disruptions, if you watch the film, you watch what happens defensively. Like, there's a reason Indiana didn't get many yards on the ground. Keith Randolph was one of the big ones. But Calvin Avery's emergence. Like, sometimes you hear this training camp, hoopla. Everybody's going to be good, right? Like, everybody's going to step up and do their job.
A lot of NFL draft picks in training camp, huh?
Yeah, Calvin Avery has backed that up. And they were more hesitant about, building him up too much. And even after one game, they didn't want to say, oh, Calvin Avery has arrived. They said he's got to do it consistently. He played well against Indiana after what I thought was his best game against Wyoming. So your starting defensive line looks pretty good. And to be honest with you, against at least Indiana, Jamal Woods was good. Bryce Barnes was good. T-Rod Edwards was good. So the defensive line, I think we knew the two guys would be good. I think the depth, especially with Calvin Avery, has played a little bit better to this point. I think you got way bigger tests coming up, especially against the run when you play Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota in that 3-game stretch. But so far, so good for that defensive line.
I agree. And it's exactly what we thought, Jeremy. We thought the starting group of that was going to be good. We had questions about nose tackle. I still think maybe it's fair to still have some. You want to see, 2 games isn't enough to alleviate every concern we've ever had about that position. But I think it's played out how we thought it was going to. And I feel like maybe a little bit of Johnny Newton's game, because it was such a brutal loss, has gotten overlooked from Friday night. And the stats don't exactly just the box score stats, I should say, don't reinforce just this insanely disruptive and good game. Dude, he was awesome. Like, that guy made himself money on Friday night in Bloomington.
Absolutely. Okay. Next spot. we will go to is the secondary, because they have three really good players. And not that it's unexpected, but to see that come to fruition yet again with Devin Witherspoon, Sidney Brown, I thought was great against Indiana. And certainly Quan Martin was maybe the best player in the field against Wyoming, and had another good game against Indiana. And the thing I love about those guys, and this is kudos to Aaron Henry, it's kudos to Ryan Walters, is the physicality they play with is a tone setter. It really is a tone setter. I mean, what you saw at the beginning of that Indiana game, with Devin Witherspoon decleating somebody with what looks like a fumble, now as we look back on that play, but then Sidney Brown as well, the next play, that makes a great read and tackle for loss and decleats another guy. So I think that's a tone setter. And despite a rough first half on some big plays, Joey, at the end of the day, Indiana had 6.3 yards per pass attempt. They threw the ball 52 times. They're going to have some yards. So I think you take that a lot of games, but they just had a couple big plays that really hurt you. And we'll get into that here. But those three players give you a really high floor in that secondary, and they're all part of a secondary that was great last year. So we thought it'd be a strength. It is a strength.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Devin Witherspoon play, because Brett Bielema didn't come out and say, hey, that was also a fumble, but he didn't not say it either. And I think, like, if you listen to him, I left with the vibe, and I don't think I'm wrong, that was a very similar play to the Chase Brown fumble later. And I just think it felt to me like Brett wanted to get that point out there. There were some defensive breakdowns and things that you'd have to see cleaned up. I thought Ryan Walters' point, and thinking back to the game, the tempo on 3rd and 16 when he was trying to basically sub packages, like he took ownership for that. It was 40 yards, and that hurt him. But that was an interesting point. So Connor Bates had 330 passing yards. Just off the top of my mind, the two huge ones, 52 and 40. That's 100. I'm not very good at math, Jeremy, but that's I believe that is 112.
Well, and then you had 67 on the final drive, right? Which was really a breakdown, and we'll get into that around here. But yeah, I mean,
so that's
most of the game,
169 at 330 came on one drive and two plays. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty solid performance. Now, again, and we'll get into there are some areas they need to clean up, like broken coverage has hurt you. But those three guys back there, again, this was kind of obvious by listening, by watching, by understanding who returned, that those three guys were going to anchor the defensive secondary. I think Taz Nicholson's played okay. It seems like he's battling some sort of soft tissue, which I know you mentioned before, just to rehash, is kind of a catch-all for anything that isn't broken or torn. And is at least that's how I perceive it when Brett Bielema speaks. So yeah, I think that has been a positive. And look at Wyoming's stats. Their second game, it was better than 5 completions for 30 yards. I mean, it's an impressive secondary, but there are some growing pains at certain positions.
Well, Jay Lehman said it. He thinks there might be 5 guys, NFL guys, draft picks on the defense, 3 of them in the secondary, 2 on the defensive line. So that's a good start. That's a good start, at least for Illinois. The last positive I have here, Joey, Big Ten West just isn't that good. So you're going to have a lot of games. You have an opportunity to win the game, just like last year. It's finding a way to close them out. But I don't think any of us are impressed by Iowa. But offensively, if you can score 17, 20 points, you're going to have a chance to win that game. And Illinois did that last year. Of course, special teams error hurt them there. I'm not saying Illinois is going to win that game now, but it is a winnable game. Minnesota, you beat last year. I think Minnesota is good. I think they're pretty good, but they're not world beaters. Nebraska, beat them again, right? I'm not impressed by them. They got some good athletes. But coaching wise, I think Illinois has a way better staff. Purdue, I think you match up well.
I was wondering how you were going to sneak that in there.
Yeah. Purdue,
Scott Frost.
It's just bad. It's just bad coaching. Purdue, I think you match up well. I think it showed last year. Slow down Charlie Jones. I think you got a chance, because the rest of that roster's, besides that passing and that makes them so different in the Big Ten West. I'm not like Northwestern. Pat Fitzgerald, pretty well, usually a good coach, right? And they got some strength in the trenches, but it's not a team that terrifies me either, even though they should be better. So I always think the Big Ten West is going to give you opportunities. Michigan State, we'll see how good they are. They're certainly talented. But you're gonna have a lot of close games, Joey. It's just about finding a way to close them out.
Yeah, I think there's a reason Brett Bielema and Josh Whitman aren't exactly racing to the end to erase divisions
Oh,
in the Big Ten. Big Ten West it's a pretty attractive look for a program trying to steal a couple wins early in a rebuild. But yeah, man, I'm with you. Like the schedule, it gets harder. I mean, this was a stretch you would have liked to see Illinois really hit the gas, and there's still. We'll see what happens on Friday. I think we're all kind of penciling in Chattanooga. If that's a loss, there's probably more alarms to sound than a bowl game slipping away.
I don't see
But
this team losing that game. I don't go into that game.
No.
Like I think I've gotten over that. Wyoming, I think, was just another reason, like another data point to say, I don't think you got to worry about that with Chase Brown, with a new offense that just uses its playmakers and a great defense. Like I think this defense could be really good yet again. I just think this coaching staff has gotten them over that hurdle. Obviously, the hurdle we haven't seen is win the games you should win. Like at the end of games, like you have to be able to close those out.
Yeah. So again, the West opponents are you like your chances. I don't know that you're going to win. I don't know how many of those you're going to win. I don't want to say you're not going to win a lot or a little. I don't know, but I don't think you go into those feeling like maybe Wisconsin's going to be a tough one.
That's the
Wisconsin's going to be a tough one. Like that's a really tough one. And again, your crossover games, you needed to take advantage Friday. You didn't do that against Indiana. You ditched Penn State. You got Indiana. And Michigan's going to be that's tough, dude. That is a tall order to go into the big house and beat this Michigan team right now. Michigan State, I don't know, but like as long as you got the West, it feels like chances are there.
Yeah. All right, let's get into the concerns because there are plenty after you lose a game like you just did. Outside of beating them themselves, right? Like they have to figure that out. I think we all understand that. One of my big questions is, can this team stretch the field vertically? Can they do it? They tried against Indiana. They got one big play down the field. They got one big play down the field of Wyoming. I understand you didn't have to do it against Wyoming, but it's still a question mark. And I know you said, like, yeah, the receivers got to catch the ball. Tommy DeVito also has to put it where the receivers can get it. And I know Isaiah Williams mistimed that jump down the field. That ball's got to be better. The ball to Tip Ryman that was thrown behind him. Now, Tip didn't see the one week one, but that's got to be a better ball. That was open. You got to give your guy a chance. That said, both sides of the connection have to be better. I broke down the stats here, Joey. I'll get to it here in a second, but they've been really good on these underneath routes and very efficient in doing that. But they have to find a way to convert once you get down the field. And it's not all the time because your efficiency, completion rate is going to go down. But on passes of 10 yards or fewer, they're 42 of 50 for 313 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's really good, right? Now you're going to complete those passes, but the yards per attempt is pretty good given the distance. On throws of longer than 10 yards, 6 of 17, 113 yards, 1 touchdown, interception. You need to complete 3 or 4 more of those, right? Like if you complete 3 or 4 more of those, if you complete 1 or 2 more of those at Indiana, it's a completely different game.
I mean, yeah, it's that first drive. Him and Isaiah Williams, Tommy DeVito and Isaiah Williams were that close to that big play down the sideline. Isaiah Williams isn't the biggest guy in the world. Like that's those passes to him, deep passes, they got to kind of fall in the bucket. Yeah. Just because there's not a lot of radius there.
Yeah, I don't put that on Tom. I don't put that on Tom because right here, here's the issue. Sorry to interrupt, but like the issue is your fast guy is small. He's got a small catch radius, so you have to drop it into a bucket. But the problem is your big guys aren't the fastest. I think Pat Bryant has the best combination of that, of the guys you play, but Casey Washington probably isn't beating people over the top. Brian Hightower, he's going to have to be a go up and get it guy like Bebe. I think he can do those things. We saw it against Indiana, but it's just the margin for error isn't quite as big as a guy who can just run down the field like Deuce Spann and get behind a defense. Do you have that guy? And is Ashton Hollins or Ian Pugh ready? Probably not, right? Like those guys are really raw. I don't know. I just don't know if you have the piece that you need to stretch the field vertically as often as you need.
Yeah, and that doesn't change, right? I mean, I don't think you can accelerate putting Ashton Hollins or Ian Pugh out there. Those guys came in with I think there was probably the understanding that was going to be some long-term, get them in the weight room type of deal. I don't know. That's where you would have liked to see them get in the portal and get a guy who can do that, or not lose a guy who can do that, who's now at Florida State and do Spann.
Yeah, because
So
Joe DeMarce and Cody Case are not those guys.
they are not. And that, I think, Jeremy, that's where the concern is. That's not an underperforming type of deal. That's right now that player is not ready to play on this roster. So like that,
Or you couldn't draw
the
that
player
player
to game around that.
Yeah, you couldn't
Yeah,
ice that player to come to your roster because they're like, why would I want to go play for that passing game? Which is why this year is so important for Barry Lundy to show improvement there.
yeah. No, we'll see, man. But I think that's the concern, that you've got to game around, because I don't think there's an answer between now and Northwestern when the regular season ends, that you're going to be able to solve that.
I think it's a lot of pressure on Tommy DeVito to be accurate on those. And is that fair? I don't know, but like that's what it's going to call for here. All right. The interior offensive line. I think Isaiah Adams has been pretty good at left guard, as you said, that first game. I thought Jordan Slaughter came in and stabilized things a little bit in the last 2 weeks. But we had questions about Alex Pihlstrom. Listen, it's a great story being able to do what he's doing, but to rely on him as a Big Ten center, could you do it? And through 2 weeks, I think we've seen some good things, but some inconsistency. And I think most of it isn't as much one-on-one battles with Pihlstrom. It's more the communication errors that are happening between him and Zy Chrysler mostly. But Zy Chrysler is kind of a raw guy. They've said that. I think they expected some ups and downs and some growing pains with him, but on the 4th and 1 play, they might have had a chance if between the center and guard, there wasn't a defensive lineman that got penetration, right? Like maybe Chase Brown would have had a chance, even if it's not the best play call, but that was a miscommunication. We've seen a lot of miscommunications otherwise, and just some breakdowns, some missed assignments, Joey. So that has to improve. And that's a position you wonder, do they make a change at some point, or do they continue with this and know that there's going to be some growing pains early and you'll start to see a turnaround coming up soon? That'll be interesting.
I think it will. And I think I agree with you. I think that they probably expected Zy Chrysler to, he was raw coming out, raw to a degree coming out of junior college. He wasn't Isaiah Adams level of ready to drop in there and play. But I think their hope is there's a long-term payoff, and you could probably grow out of some of the short-term issues, if that makes sense. And so that's really interesting, Jeremy. And Alex Pihlstrom, look, they put a lot on centers. Like Bart Miller will tell you that. He said that several times between spring ball and now. Like there's a big expectation on centers, and you didn't have to think about it because you had Doug Kramer, who started a lot of games last year, and he wore a lot. And he had that about him, where he was I mean, when Doug Kramer spoke, dude, you and I know, we covered this team long enough. A lot of people knew. Everybody knew when Doug Kramer had something to say. And I think there's just a lot of those intangible things with him. And Alex Pihlstrom said, he's like, look, I see it. I see it all happening. Then you put in a tempo offense, and there's just a lot to try to communicate. It's not that he's not seeing what needs to be done or the calls that need to be made. I think, and the way he described it, is he's just trying to articulate that concisely, loud, like all of that together. And Bart Miller said, he's like, we're continuing to empower him, to push him and keep that confidence up, and to keep him, with the voice. But there's been kind of a rough couple weeks at times for him. I thought Indiana was much better than Wyoming. Now, when it wasn't much better, it hurt down at the goal line, right? Like that's when those fall aparts hurt a little bit.
Yeah, and most of their yards are coming off tackle. Like most of their yards are coming on stretch runs because the tight ends are pretty good blockers, and the tackles, as we said, are pretty good blockers. At some point, when you get to the goal line, you got to be able to count on those guys. And, I know people talked about, would you put Tommy DeVito under center? Do you feel like you can get a push, right? Like he's not a huge guy to sneak it like Brandon Peters anyway, but can you get a push like that? That's still a question mark, because while they're bigger up front, they're just not as reliable at this point. Now, that could change, of course, as the season goes along. At this point last year, the interior of the offensive line was not very good, right? And then Jack Badovanek kind of figured it out, and they ended up being a lot better towards the end of the season. So it'd be interesting to see, though, if Pihlstrom and Chrysler continue to struggle, does Slaughter get the spot at right guard? Do they put him in there just to try and win some games here, right? And then, Josh Kreutz is way smaller than Pihlstrom, but I know it sounds like, Joey, he's starting to shine a little bit, or at least improve a lot more, because they didn't think he was ready. They were thinking about getting a transfer because they didn't think Josh Kreutz would be ready coming into this year. They didn't do that because of Pilstrom's emergence, but it sounds like Josh Kreutz could be an option at some point this season.
I'm really interested to see how they use him, because it sounds like he's getting maybe a little more physical. He's starting to maybe find himself. I guess I'm going to say more physical is probably not the right term to use there, but maybe finding himself a little bit at center. So it's interesting. And Bart Miller brought him up twice during an interview today. And, maybe it was nothing, but it may have also been something, because he brought up the backup center twice. I joked, Jeremy, Jordan Anderson at fullback, Tommy DeVito under center, Hunter the Van Whiteneck halfback, and just knock Tommy DeVito through the end zone.
Yeah.
Where do I go? If he does that and a Chrysler Town and Country doesn't give him an NIL deal, I'm going to be irate.
At the same time, you still need the center and guards to block.
Yes.
It's going to take a while for Hunter Whiteneck to get through that line of scrimmage there. All right, next concern. I thought this defense got a lot of pressure last week against Indiana. 1 sack. Those plays, like, hey, I think pressures are important. They force incompletions, right? They can screw up plays, but a sack, right? The reason we care so much about those is because you lose yards, you get way behind the sticks, the clock keeps running, right? Like one more sack could have been the difference if they just got to the quarterback. And Ryan Walters, I thought, had a great pressure package, and that's why Bazelak was under pressure. I mean, 20 pressures in a game is a lot, but they only had 1 sack. So I think you got to find a way to get the quarterback to the ground more often, and then get more big plays out of that second level. The outside linebackers and linebackers, just not a lot of big plays. It's always the defensive line guys, the defensive backs. You got to find, whether it's CJ Hart or Darkangelo or Seth Coleman and Ezekiel Holmes, only have what? I think it's 3 pressures this entire season and 100 and something snaps. Like, those guys need to get to the quarterback, make more big plays.
Yeah, especially on the edges. That's where I look at this, and we heard, hey, we feel like we're a deeper team and you lack that proven talent. Well, I don't know, because you're not getting pressure from the outside. And that to me is the most concerning part of that. I don't know, Jimmy, what do you want to call them? The front 5, front 6. I mean, they're not defensive linemen. They're not, whatever. You need to see that. And I thought it was really telling that Gabe Akis had a lot of those late game, third down, pin your ears back and go situations.
And Alec Bryant. Those two both come in on third downs right now.
Yeah, and I think that's something to monitor going into the Virginia game, is what does that look like? Because, dude, you got to put pressure on Brennan Armstrong. You got with the offensive line, kind of a retooled O-line, you got to get some pressure on that dude. That's the same dude who put up 405 and 5 touchdowns on you last year. And you got to get after him. So that to me is that biggest concern in that level. I know we talked about the inside linebackers post game, like 1 a.m. from Bloomington, Jeremy. But I think there's also some, we haven't seen the Nebraska CJ Hart to this point yet. Tariq Barnes, I still feel like is pretty steady.
Yeah. I thought he had a great game against Indiana. I think he made some nice plays on the edge there.
Yeah, I think he's fine.
Darkangelo is fine, but it's like, hey, you need a big play. And I think they would say that we need to, whether it's a forced fumble, whether it's, an interception in the middle of the field or something like that. Like, you just need one or two of those big plays. But I think most of the edge guys, right? Like, yeah, they had some nice stops against Wyoming, but you're just not seeing those flash plays. Like, so I don't want to overlook the solid play that helps you keep Indiana to 32 rushing yards. The edges and linebackers are certainly a part of that, but it's just those big plays that change a game. The defense has been strong. If you want to be great, you need more from those guys. All right. The other part, I think, of the defense, we wondered about the other cornerback spot. We were wondered about the free safety spot. Kendall Smith, Taz Nicholson. I don't think those guys have been bad. I think Taz has been fine, but teams attack him. Kendall Smith got beat twice in the first half, and Jay Lehman and I broke that down in the film. Then he bounced back, I thought, in the second half. I think they've both been really good against the run, but those weak spots in the secondary, or weaker spots in the secondary, teams are going to test those, right? Because they know the other 3 guys are really, really good. And I think you saw depth become an issue, and That's going to be a big one here at the end for me. It's depth overall, but you saw depth become an issue when Taz Nicholson couldn't play and Tyler Strange struggled and Terrell Jennings struggled. So the depth in the secondary, the weak spots in there can't overcome what are your strong spots elsewhere.
Yeah, and I think you probably want to see continued growth from some of those secondary spots. I thought the depth behind Taz Nicholson, especially early in that final drive, that was concerning, Jeremy. Like that was, you saw some misplays from Tyler Strange, from Terrell Jennings. Like that is as much as we propped up and were, I think, reasonably excited about the play of Sidney Brown, Quan Martin, and Devin Witherspoon. You got to look at the exact same two spots you wondered going into the Wyoming game, going into fall camp. What does that look like? I don't know. And I'm with you. I don't know that it's been, you throw your hands up and say, well, they're screwed. I don't think that's not fair. I just think that I don't think my questions have been answered about those two spots to this point.
Yeah, and every defense is going to have, and that's what we came into this year knowing those three spots are going to be pretty good. Can you get solid play out of those other guys? And not that I don't think they're getting solid play or satisfactory or okay play, but can you get better than that to make it a great defense? Right. That's a question, because Tony Adams is in the NFL. Kirby Joseph is in the NFL. You never thought you were going to replace those guys with the same kind of production. You just can't have a huge drop off. And there have been moments where Illinois has struggled at those two positions. Special teams inconsistency has to be another one, right? Caleb Griffin, bad first game, good second game. I know Brett Beal would talk about kickoffs, but just field goal kicking. Kickoffs have been pretty good. Hugh Robertson, good first game, terrible second game. Right. And then the return game's been a little bit better, more interesting, but you're giving up some yards also when you don't get the return to the 25-yard line. So I just think the consistency of the special teams, something we expected, but has played out that way, Joey, that special teams wouldn't be as strong when you lose Blake Hayes and James McCourt.
Yeah, you lost really good players at those positions. The kick return still is so interesting to me, because I thought the first week it was like, oh my gosh, holy crap, they're not just waving, they're returning. I'd have to go back and look, so I don't want to say this with as much, maybe you have the answer. Cody Case returned, not Cody Case, I'm sorry, Peyton Vining returned one against Indiana. It did not get to the 25. I don't recall it being that close to the 25, relatively speaking. And I don't remember how many more, there were none. Yeah, that was kind of, to me, that was like, yeah, this plan ain't in against this kickoff unit. Wave this thing and go to 25. And Brett Bielema said, that's kind of the give and take in the preseason. Brett had, I'm paraphrasing, but like, you get a free spot at the 25. Like, you've got to really feel good about doing something.
He did have two returns. I forgot there was the squib that he picked up and took for like 9 yards or whatever it was. So that hurt. He's got one great return, three not so great returns, right?
Yeah. So I'm interested with what that looks like moving forward. And Hugh Robertson, that was a tough go of it, man. That was a tough go of it in Bloomington on those first two punts. I think they combined for less than 50 yards, if I'm not mistaken.
35.
Yeah, man. That's
12 yards.
And Indiana, I think, got 6 points out of those two.
I know they got
the shank punt. The shank punt. The next play was the 52.
That was the Luke Ford turnover. Right?
Oh boy.
No, there's a lot of swings there, but they definitely got a
lot of swings. Yeah,
they definitely got a field goal off of one of them. My biggest concern remains the concern I had in the offseason, and that's depth. Right? I think we see it at running back. Chase Brown, when he goes off the field now without Josh McCray there's a drop off. Like there's a clear drop off, and not that Reggie Love is not capable, or Chase Hayes is not capable, but I think Reggie Love is talented, but he's just not the running back that Chase Brown is. I think, we see it with the DBs late in that game, that when those guys were off, it's a drop off. Like the defensive line has been a little bit better than I expected, but if not Johnny Newton or Keith Randolph got hurt, that's a huge concern. And let's talk about Johnny Newton. As good as he was, 76 of 80 snaps he had to play, they couldn't take him off the field, and that showed up late. There was one pass rush. He just had no gas left in him. If DeVito gets hurt, if Chase Brown got hurt, if Isaiah Williams got hurt, I know a lot of teams would have this with their top playmakers, but for Illinois especially, they can't afford many key injuries.
No, I thought the most interesting thing Brett Bielema said post-game, And I don't want to say he walked it back on Monday, but it did not have the same conviction, I didn't feel like, as it did on Friday night. I always said we're paper thin at certain positions. So to your point one, Jeremy, I think you and I have deducted that to mean injuries, rotating guys like Johnny Newton in and out of there. But I'm also assuming, and Brett Bielema didn't say this, but I'm also assuming it to mean, oh, what if someone isn't playing to the standard? Like, do you feel like you have a viable option behind that person to go out there and make plays? And that's kind of what I took away. I don't know if that's what Brett Bielema meant, but that, to me, that was we're paper thin at certain positions was the first time he said that I recall, or maybe at least in such plain terms.
Yes.
I thought that
It's
was
that whole
interesting.
Penn State ordeal with the offensive line. He's been very careful about that, right? Because he doesn't want his words twisted. But
Which is exactly why he's not going to come out and say, we're paper thin at X, Y, and Z. That's for us to deduct. He ain't saying that.
but we know where it is, right?
Right.
Like the offensive line, they still don't have depth. The defensive line, it's been better than we expected, but they still don't have depth. Do they have as much linebacker depth as they talk about? I don't know. Outside linebacker, maybe they have depth now, but they still need playmakers. And in the secondary, they don't have a lot of depth. Even if Matthew Bailey's been a surprise, it's a little concern that he's second string, right? And it's a little concern that Terrell Jennings, who was playing D2 last year, is your number 3 corner.
Yeah, and I get like Matthew Bailey. That's a fun story, fun surprise. Illinois just maybe needs that break to have that surprise come into position that Sidney Brown in front of him.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, like I get, like, I'm sure there is a lot of excitement about Matthew Bailey. I don't think any of that was manufactured. It's just like, how does that translate from fall camp to now? Well, it doesn't. And if it does, uh-oh. I mean, that means your star's not back. It's like, it's just, it's how it is. Like the positions they probably need depth at, you look at maybe a free safety or some of those positions mentioned, that's not where it is. You might have some at some like very minuscule amounts at some position, but again, with Matthew Bailey, we're still talking about a true freshman.
All right, Joe, before I let you go, just your thoughts against Virginia, key to a game, what you think needs to happen for Illinois to bounce back. Because if they win this one, man, you're kind of back to where you thought you were, right? Like I thought they'd be 2-1 after 3 games. Maybe you lost one that you didn't, and you end up winning Virginia one. Maybe some fans didn't think, but Vegas thinks you're going to win. So just any thought you have on this Virginia game?
Dude, this is, you send us a message to get on top of things and do our job here. And I was like, I don't know who to pick because I didn't leave Bloomington like, well, I'll tell you, this team's screwed. Yeah. I didn't feel that at all. I thought there was a lot that they did well. I thought they got in their way, but I can't shake the sight of Brennan Armstrong. I mean, just throwing that, like, dude, they've got some dudes at wide receiver. Like Illinois' defensive secondary is going to be strained and tested. And like, you need those positions that we talked about to really maybe find that next level because Brennan Armstrong's going to throw this thing. So I don't know, dude. Like, I don't know what the pick is or what I think. I think you've got to play better in the secondary. And I think if there were ever a game for your pass rush to kind of wake up a little bit and go get the quarterback, especially on the edges, like now is that time.
Yep.
Because you could kind of flip a little bit. 2-1, like this is stupid, and it feels stupid to say. Just the feeling of 2-1 going into Chattanooga, which probably puts you at 3-1, is so different than getting out of these first 4 2-2 and trying to have to find 4 Big Ten wins just to get a bowl. And a bowl means a lot. Like I know it's Brett Bielema's second year, but I think it can mean a lot on the recruiting trail. 15 practices, a whole deal. You got to get some pressure on Armstrong, I think, man. That's huge. I think Chase Brown's going to run, Jeremy. Yeah. I think Chase Brown's going to have himself a nice day.
I mean, Richmond ran for 170 yards, right? And Virginia's going to be focused on him. But I think Illinois shown at least enough offensively that they can balance things out and go to the air, or Tommy DeVito with his legs when they need to. So I think it's a fascinating matchup of what is a strength with Illinois' defense, way different defense than a year ago, against Virginia's strength, which is a passing offense. They run the ball a hell of a lot more with Tony Elliott now being kind of their offensive guy, obviously their head coach too, and Des Kitchings, who Brett Bielema raved about. But yeah, that offense, they're probably going to, Virginia's going to probably score in the 20s, even if Ryan Walters is really good at his job. So Illinois, can you find enough ways to finish in the red zone? Because I think you're going to be able to move the ball against Virginia because Chase Brown's really good. I like what Barry-Loney's doing. Can you cash in? Can you not shoot yourself in the foot? I think it's going to be a really close game. I did my predictions. I don't change my predictions, the first couple weeks of the year. In the preseason, I had this as a 28-24 Virginia win. Now, Vegas obviously knows better than me, and they have Illinois as a 4.5-point favorite right now based on what they've seen. Maybe there's some money to be had there because, Illinois is really dominated most of the stats, most of the pace of play, controlling the clock. They had to make so many mistakes in Indiana to lose that game. So maybe it's a value buy to pick Illinois here.
Yeah, man. I think it's going to be 31-27, Jeremy. I just don't know which way. I have no earthly idea which way that's going to go. But I think that's my final score. I'll figure the rest of it out.
Staying on the fans' sides there, not picking a winner there.
I mean, I think I'm going to take Virginia because I just to me, this is I've been kind of rash, reasoning with myself through the last few days.
But I could totally see Illinois winning this game. That's when we make predictions.
Yes.
Everyone wants to, that's all they care about in our whole preview. Where I spent how many hours, Joey, spent breaking down, watching film, and all they care about is that one single line of who you pick. These things are hard, right? But I think Illinois should have a chance to win this game. Can they do it? Can they find a way to close the game? Is my question. When I know Virginia has the best player on, maybe the best quarterback on the field, right? Like Chase Brown might be the best player, but Brendan Armstrong is one of the top 15, 20 quarterbacks in the country, probably the best quarterback they'll see all year. Sorry, Aiden O'Connell. I think that's true. Can they win that game? I think Ryan Walters will give him a chance. I think Barry-Loney will have chances. I think this coaching staff's pretty good, but can they do it? They still got to prove that.
That's exactly where I'm at, dude. I think if we do our post-game pod, it's hey, Illinois won. Yeah, that makes sense to me that Illinois won. But after that collapse last week, it was a collapse. They couldn't, the score wasn't some big lead that they bungled. It was just a series of mini collapses that lost. That I just need to see that they can do it. I think that's where I come down to. Show me this is kind of a.
And I know we saw some of those things last year. We saw some of those.
I know.
But Penn State, did they really close that one? Did they Minnesota? The defense made the extra stop, right? While they didn't against Maryland or Purdue, can the offense close it? That's my question, because I don't put last week on the defense whatsoever. Can the offense find a way to close out these games? That's still what we got to see.
That's what I'm saying. And until I see that, which will be after Saturday, it's a prove it game. Prove that those red zone mishaps were not fluky, but you've learned from those over the course of the last 7 days. I know they had an off day in there. So I think you just got to see it. This is kind of, I told you I don't like must wins. I think that's stupid. I think it's a cheap way to get clicks when it's lame in September. But I think there's a good chance to show that maybe you kind of are who you think you are. Does that make sense? That you can cash in critical moments.
At some point, it's about winning the actual games, right? That's what they have to do now, is win the actual games. All right, Joey Wagner, thank you as always, man.
Thanks, man.